You are set, sir. Thank you.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start tonight's the City of Olivet's Planning Community Design Commission meeting for January 16th, 2025 in orders. Thanks, everybody, for being in attendance. And Mr. Wallach, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Member Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Member Daniel Rosenberg.
Absent.
Member Laura Ragsdale.
Present.
Member Petrie Powell.
Present.
Secretary Sam Wallach, present. Vice Chairman Brian Lewis.
Absent.
Chairman Rob Dragell.
Present. Thanks, Sam. Let it also be known that our City Council Liaison, Mayor Missy Waldman, is in attendance, as well as Carlos Trejo, Olivet's City of Olivet's Planning Community Development Department's Director, Dawn Doty, Senior Planner, Jack Carswell, Planning and Zoning Administrator. I'm not missing anybody, so that's good. So once again, thanks everybody for being in attendance tonight. I'm sure you guys all know this. Do we have anybody on Zoom, by the way?
Yes, we have a couple of, oops, I just turned it off. Yes, we do. We got 3 individuals, and I believe all 3 are regarding, 2 are regarding 15 Stacy and 1 is for Price Road.
Okay, good. Well, I'll just explain kind of, we follow the agenda type program here. So if you have the agenda, we'll go down each item one by one. As part of those agenda items, there'll be a staff report. Staff will go through that report with us. There'll be some question and answers with commission members, with staff. And then typically we bring on the petitioner to either ask further questions or to get some more background. And then we typically bring on public comments related to that agenda item. We do offer a time right after this kind of introduction to go over general public comments. So if anybody in the audience has any general public comments or online, please go ahead and online, just start raising your hand right now, just so we can be prepared. We do ask that the public comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes, just to kind of expedite things and to make sure everybody's opinions get heard. Sometimes we have a much bigger crowd, where it's much more of an issue, but we do need to be respectful and just try to avoid any redundancy if possible. And then if you're online, we do ask you to, like I said, to raise your hand. If you're brought on as to the panel, by default, the mic is muted and the video is turned off, and we need both of those turned on. So if you can be looking for that when you get on board, to make sure those are both turned on, that will help speed things up. Carlos, did I miss anything?
No, sir.
Okay, good. So then we'll move on to public comments. Is there anybody in the audience that has any public comments that are not related to an agenda item? Seeing none, Carlos, is there anybody online that has a public comment?
Just to make sure, is anybody online just wanting to talk regarding to something general regarding our land use regulations? I believe all 3 that are online are related to an application.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll move on to item 3, old business, and it's item 3A, which is 15 Stacy Drive. Jack?
Good evening, Commission. So before you tonight is 15 Stacy Drive. This house was introduced back on December 19th of 2024, and then was deferred due to the discussion of the neighbor concerns and the stormwater review. Staff would like to indicate that there was also the concerns related to tree preservation and the tree identification. In response to that, an updated arborist report has been provided, and that's within your packet. And the petitioner did provide a corresponding site plan that accurately indicates the correct identification and the status of the removal of the trees. Staff believes that the petitioner has addressed the concerns related to tree preservation, and that just a little tiny note is that 7 trees are deemed for replacement, and that's indicated on that report. Or 7 trees they plan to replace and provide 7 replacement trees. In terms of the conditions or concerns related to, the concerns related to stormwater, the petitioner had coordinated a phone meeting with the adjacent neighbors who were out of town, but they were on through FaceTime. While meeting on the site with the representative for the said neighbors, staff has forwarded the latest site plan to the city stormwater consultants, and the petitioner has agreed to coordinate with the neighbors for another on-site visit that would occur before the rough grading. So, or once that's complete, they would go out there and have another on-site meeting. The petitioner also has agreed to having an on-site meeting with staff, but that had not come to fruition yet because of the weather that we had recently. Staff will also investigate the concerns noted about the retaining wall along the rear of both properties, but it's our understanding and from the information that was provided after those meetings that it does seem like it's coming from off-site improvements, and that it's from our understanding, the petitioner indicated that the homeowners were content with the proposed stormwater, and that staff will work administratively with them once we've gotten the comments back from the stormwater consultant and we have that meeting on site. So it's staff's understanding that the concerns that were brought up at the previous meeting have been addressed, and that to reiterate that staff found no concerns pertaining to the building plans and the community design guidelines for 15 Stacy.
Jack, can you kind of go through how they're going to address those comments or address those concerns?
I think it's easy as a petitioner to come up here and explain that just
Okay.
because they had that on-site meeting and we haven't had the chance to actually go out there and have that on-site meeting yet with the weather. But I
Understood.
think they'll have the better idea of how that conversation went down.
And do you have the trees that are going to be removed, but which ones, if you don't mind?
Yes. It's a fair amount of trees. So what's deemed to be removed is there's 24 of them. It's in the updated arborist report, which is, I want to say page 3, 4, and 5 of the staff report.
Is that this right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. very
Yep,
good.
that's the drip line though. So if you flipped over the page before that, that should be the identification and what's deemed to be preserved and to be removed.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Good.
It's also on your dais in front of you.
Oh, I didn't look at the back of the page.
Oh yeah, no worries.
My fault.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
The trees that are indicated on there for replacement, they are numbered. I'm unsure if they have numbered them on that plan, but they are numbered there of where they, what street trees, replacement canopy trees, and then they have the ones that are deemed to be removed indicated on there as well.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
great. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Peter.
I'm not sure exactly where during this dialogue that this comment that I'm about to make is addressed. And if that's something we can do offline at a meeting elsewhere is fine too. But I think last time I had commented that I thought it was really helpful to see the grades and what have you for the entire area, and that this was a problem that didn't necessarily start on this particular parcel. And so one of the things that I'm wondering is there any proactive way, and Planning Commission may not be the right vehicle, but that staff set up some mechanism by which an area, let's call it a forest, is assessed for stormwater with, say, MSD, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, whomever would be dealing with stormwater. And if there is a better solution, rather than having us try to adjust it on one tree of that big forest, if that makes sense. I just find it, like we're making this particular parcel or go through all this stuff, but if we're not addressing what's going on that is leading to this parcel collecting so much water or worse, runoff water into the neighbor's property, it needs, I think, a bigger solution than what we can see here. And so I don't know what the proposal would be, or whether there would be any kind of grant funding from MSD or the Corps of Engineers to do a study area to see if there is something that could be at least educated on, in which we could devise a plan so that when a plan comes in, we're not just looking at that one parcel, we're looking at the whole picture and making good decisions for the whole picture when it comes down to the exact parcel. And so I don't know if any discussions have been made. I don't know whether there's grants available for study areas, but I've only been on this commission a few months and we've had numerous stormwater issues, and I just don't know that always dealing with it on the very individualized parcel is the best way of really assessing a global concern. That's just a comment, and do with it what you will. But
Well-
I thought that was something that we should talk about. or at least expressed to the mayor and then,
Do you want to?
yeah.
Yeah, and it's something we can look into for a future discussion item at a work session. And maybe as early as the February 6th meeting.
We've had before you were on this board, we had a lot of reviews of stormwater issues, kind of going through, how some of these, like you said, it's kind of more of a street neighborhood or a couple neighborhoods that are the issues, and a lot of it is due to old infrastructure that was designed for, previous conditions, The other unfortunate part, if you talk to anybody at MSD, is they have limited funding. And they run into lots of issues where they try to improve things, but nobody passes the bonds. And that's, I've heard one lawyer who was in a meeting with MSD, and they just said, we wish we could have. We have plans in place, but nobody's passed these. And that's the unfortunate part. So there are limited funds, and it would be MSD would be the most likely, because this wouldn't fall under the Corps of Engineers, jurisdiction. But I think what we tried to encourage in the last meeting is to get at least the current developer, the adjacent neighbor, and even encouraged getting the neighbor behind too, kind of talk about it to try to come up with a solution that works. Now, supposedly that meeting's occurred, and that's what I'd like to hear once they get on board. But it's a challenge, and unfortunately, there's a few other areas that are probably much higher risk, because it's not just flooding yards, it's flooding basements and things like that, multiple times. So.
Just don't think that just because we know money's tight, certainly in Missouri it is. But I don't think it's not worth investigating what might be out there. It may be even state funds, who knows?
Yeah.
Federal funds, who knows? That's what the question is. Is there a way to look at maybe a street that is overlooked because we have maybe bigger fish to fry? I don't know. Haven't been here long enough to know which are really our hotspots, but we're taking this approach on a parcel by parcel basis when a global solution might be just even plans. It doesn't necessarily have to be them doing it. It's just, we know that we can fix this if we did this on 4 different properties or remove the pool or whatever that issue is.
Carlos, we did have another engineering firm that came in to review one of the previous properties or previous areas. And did they say anything about grants or anything like that?
Not that I recall. There's been some changes in terms of like how MSD does municipal funding
Right.
and distribution on those. We've used those for more like the tangible infrastructure projects in there. The Public Works Director is currently working on preparing a city stormwater plan to set and prioritize somewhat what you're talking about. And I think that might be worthwhile to invite him at our next meeting to kind of discuss. But he's using the funds from MSD in order to conduct that plan, because they are limited and a per capita basis. We're getting there, but we're 8,700 still isn't
It wouldn't be on the high priority list.
Well, in terms of
Too
per
small.
capita,
Yeah.
Chesterfield's going to
Yeah.
get
Of course.
quite the amount in
Yeah,
there.
it always
The
seems
other
like
thing
that.
is there is really, existing on our website, we have that information you talked about. We've identified and noted to the council these priority sites, and that's what this master plan is taking a look at, where we know that there are stormwater problems in there. And then in addition to that, we worked on a stormwater master plan for the planning purposes in there, where, again, climate change is a major factor that has come into play now. And it's not necessarily, it's getting hotter or it's getting colder. It is that the intensity of these rains
Insane.
are our infrastructure just can't keep up. It works, 95% of the time, but that 5% is now becoming 15%. And
Well, I just think it's good to hear there is a master plan. And I think that should be something that we have at our disposal when it finally, it hasn't been approved yet. the master plan. And so I think that would be helpful if we could see that so that we're also addressing, making sure that we're in compliance with that master plan.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Seeing none, I think we'll ask the petitioner to come up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks. Jeff.
State your name and address.
Yes,
Uh,
my name's Alex Barlsmeyer with McKelvey Homes. Our address is 218 Chesterfield Town Center,
Correct.
Chesterfield. Yes, so I know there was a question to kind of describe the water issue, how to resolve and what they were doing for grading. You look at the existing, you can pretty much look at it and it's, I mean, like if you go out on the site, the lot is flat basically from where the existing house went. Basically the back retaining wall there. I mean, it's flat. I mean, like you get on site and it almost looks like actually the high points up where the front of the house was, not anywhere else. So, so that's why our proposal, biggest thing we're doing, and actually this kind of leads to a lot of why so many trees are removed, is because we have to do so much grading. If you go back and look at the tree report, there's quite a number of trees. They specify reasonings for tree removal, and a lot of them just purely state grading. So that's one of the reasons there's a high percentage of trees being removed. So as for what is being done, basically, biggest thing we're doing is just trying to move the water from the back of the property back towards the front, towards the street. The biggest way we're doing that is we're introducing 2 swales along the sides of the properties, from each side of the property, to direct the water from our property, keep it on our property up to the front of the street. So, on top of that, we're adding the slightest ridge that actually runs through the middle of the yard, middle of the backyard. I mean, slight, we're talking, there's only about a 2% slope we're putting in the backyard. So it's not much, but it's more than what's actually there. And that's helping divide it. So actually most of the water coming onto the property from the right side, the eastern side of the property, will stay on that side and follow that swale back down to the street. Whereas right now, a lot of that's kind of just going in the backyard and staying in the backyard. So that's the biggest priority. And then the other side, we're introducing that swale, but that for the most part will just pick up what's basically falling on the property and follow the swale off. So
Okay.
right now, we hope that it'll be a big improvement on the northern side of the properties, bordering 17. There is a giant berm right where the property is. It's where our property just berms and then drops off under theirs. We're drastically dropping that so that there'll actually be a swale out the low part will still be on our property, not on their property as it is now. So
Even along that fence?
it won't go as that high up to their fence because their fence stops at the back of their property. I mean, like it will
The
help
side
actually
fence.
fence. They have a side fence.
Yeah.
It will help at that fence, yes. We'll drop it there, but the biggest swale will be mostly between the 2 houses towards the front of the street. So,
Because I went out and looked at it too. And I walked on the property.
Yeah.
I figured it'd be okay.
yeah,
But, along that fence line where you have those trees, it does seem to drop off and slope right into
Yeah.
the neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
And it seems like it almost channels everything, from that big hill right into that other yard.
yeah. So that right there will definitely, we're dropping that down so that the grade will be lower on our side with the swale to keep the water flowing down to the street. So
And if that's the case, I just don't know how you're gonna be able to keep trees FG, that are along that fence.
no, that's why a lot of those are being removed. F and G actually will be fine. The swale won't go that far up. The swale,
That's where it seemed like it rutted into the fence, so you might look.
to a certain extent, and that's why we're also proposing when we go in for rough grade, we'll actually rough grade this lot before we even dig the hole.
Yeah.
Because we want that water to move. We don't want to dig our hole and then it rains and all of a sudden we've got a swimming pool where our hole was because the lot doesn't drain properly.
Right.
So we're gonna rough grade before we even dig the hole. And that's when we're gonna have that meeting with the homeowner and we'll discuss all these things. There was discussion of, do we even add additional drainage on that side of that property to get water moving more. So part of that's just, once we get in there and actually start messing with the lot, then evaluate exactly what needs to be done.
On top of the hill, you know, where the other pool is, and they have that cement block
Yeah.
wall. There was a drain, you know, a flex drain that was coming out.
Yeah.
Was that just a mistake, or is that, I mean, to me, it seems like that should be reconnected and maybe even, you know, run
Yeah.
towards the north, if you will, directly towards, I guess, so it's not draining through all of these, making like an S around
Yeah.
the properties.
Yeah, I don't know if it does, I don't know if it was disconnected or if it was ever connected to anything. There is another black pipe that's running generally along the fence that I don't know if it was once connected to that. The
Would
neighbor
you-
on 17 didn't seem too worried about that though. He said not that much water comes through it, but I mean, like in this scenario, any water matters.
I'd be
So,
curious at a
yeah.
big rain to see what's coming out of there,
Mhm.
how much volume, because I could, you just never know. And if a
Exactly.
lot of water's coming out of there, I think that's an easy solution, is to try to, you know, redirect that,
Yeah.
you know, away from this area.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Sorry, I monopolized the questions. No, seeing none?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, at this time, is there any public comments related to this agenda item? Go ahead.
Please turn the microphone on and read your name and
Stephanie Todd, 7 Heather Hill Lane. I just wanted to say that Commissioner Powell brought up a really good point. And, you know, there's not you can do about it, because when people come to you, it's all piecemeal. It's like you only get to look at one lot at a time. You don't get to look at, and you can't change what's been done. But I wanted to add a couple things. So it's not stormwater, at least what I've seen on our street in our area, it's not stormwater capacity, it's the runoff. It's a problem. And and our street, you know, where I live, Heather Hill, it's on a hill, it slopes down. But there's a house there that floods in the last big rain. The entire basement flooded almost to the first floor. And I would say the reason is all these new almost all our houses are tear downs, all the new developments. What they've done, they dig out the basement, because none of these houses had basements, and then they pile up the dirt. So now our house is on a hill. And, you know, and I didn't realize, you know, so everybody made fun, oh, you're the house on the hill. Well, so at least the house below us, they did it, but the water goes in between our houses. But the house that flooded, the house got built up above them, and then, you know, the water goes down. So one thing to consider, is that make the developers haul away the dirt. Don't pile it up. And I think maybe you've gone to that, but I talked to a lot of cities for different things. And in Ellisville, they had some tear downs, and right away they started having water issues. And so they make the developers haul away the dirt. So I'm just saying that is something to, you know, I would consider when you have new plans. And also, you know, I'm sure the developer looked it over, but just keep in mind that trees and plants, they do retain water. And so it's kind of weird, this double-edged sword. Okay, we're gonna cut down all these trees so we can grade it, but now you're cutting down all these trees that help stop the water.
Exactly. It's a struggle that I think we're all trying to
Yeah, and
experience.
like you said, I mean, I don't know enough. It sounds like they've done what they could, but especially, you know, if you have a big drop off, well, maybe leave the trees. So, you know, I don't know. You know, I'm just
You can
saying.
come out, we'll walk the site together.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm just saying. I think it sounds like you've done all a good job. I'm just saying that trees and things help retain water.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
Anyone else in the audience? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Charlie Brennan with McKelvey Homes. We're at 218 Chesterfield Town Center. So just wanted to add to what Mr. Bartlesmeyer said. So after our meeting on the 19th, we met with Rod Pattershuk, who was in attendance at the meeting here. He was the representative for the Millers, who are at 17 Stacy Drive. They're down enjoying nice weather right now in Florida or Turks and Caicos. So we weren't able to meet them in person. But they did join via phone call, and we talked about the issues. The plans, to add to what Alex is mentioning, the plan is to keep most of the water that's coming from the property on, I believe, Old Bonham is the street back there, and direct it to the opposite side of the lot from 17 Stacy in the swale. So that's one of the things we're working on there. You're right. We noticed those pipes
Yeah.
from the retaining wall at the pool. One of them terminates right in the back right corner of 17 Stacy. And as you can see, all those little dotted lines up there, there's a bunch of grade going from the neighboring property down to their lot. So that kind of gives you an idea of how the water is going to flow when you're looking at it from an engineering perspective. So we might need some flexibility once we do a rough grade, see how it works. We're still awaiting some stormwater comments from the city, so we'll take that into consideration as well. And our customer, the Madeiras, they don't want to deal with the water problems that exist right now. Neither do the Millers on 17 Stacy. So our intention that we explained to them is we're going to work with you and we're going to make it better than what it is. There are some things outside of our control, like the significant slope on the property behind us, but we're willing to work with all parties and provide the best solution for our customers and for the Millers as well.
Appreciate it.
So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments in the audience? See, Carlos, will you check online?
If there is anybody online that would like to speak in regards to this petition, 15 Stacy Drive, you can show your hands. I recognize 3 of the 4 online. I think they all may be for the North Price.
Okay. Good. So, seeing no other further comments?
There
Yeah.
is a hand up.
Oh,
Yes, Mr. Madera, Mr. Madera, I'm going to transfer you over.
remember to turn on your video camera and your mic too.
Okay, Mr. Madera, I'm going to transfer you over. If you do want to speak before the commission, again, you have to accept the transfer to the panelist.
Okay, hopefully now I've connected.
You're fully connected. We can see
Okay.
you and hear you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, we're the owners of the property, and we've seen an issue and we've heard about all the problems before at this site with the water collection. And as McKelvey Homes has talked about, we are going to be working very diligently to make sure we can grade this properly. There are a lot of dead trees on this property, so a lot of the trees that are coming down are dead, and our intention is to do the adequate replacement. But again, we got to get the grading in place to determine what final trees and where they get placed would be the best use. So I just we are interested in doing the right thing here as we go forward.
Right. Thanks for your comments. Appreciate it, sir. Okay. Assuming that there's no other further comments, is there any further discussion on the commission members? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
And I'll get that motion up in just a second, sir.
Moving too fast, aren't
But we're keeping up here.
I?
You're set, sir.
Go ahead, Sam.
I'd like to make a motion. Motion to approve a petition for a site plan community design and concept stormwater management reviews for a new single family home at 15 Stacy Drive
as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated January 16th, 2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein. Motion's been made by Sam Wallach. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And seconded by Pete Trepal. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Yes. Okay, Commissioner Spiegelglass, Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approved.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
and Commissioner Jurgel.
Approved.
And the motion passes unanimously 5-0. The next step, and I do want to note the recommended conditions, just so the petitioner's aware. I'm not sure if today's report was distributed out, but conditions would be the coordinating with the neighbor, as you had noted, and then also with our stormwater consultant, and then having the final revised plan. And then these are the top of foundation, final plans, verification of setback, limit exposure, common conditions you guys have addressed in the past for all new homes in there. So the next step in this process will be for the applications for building permits.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Carlos.
Mhm.
Okay, well, seeing no other old business, we'll move on to item 4, discussion items. Item A is 1223 North Price Road and 1220 North Price Road. Carlos?
Okay. Chairman, you have on your dais a copy of a special permit that was authorized via ordinance back in 2015 that authorized auto beauty specialists to relocate from Webster Groves to the city of Olivet at the property address as 1223 North Price Road, which was an abandoned property. It was vacant for several years. Used to belong to the Murphy Group in there, and was in need of a lot of TLC. And there, and it was a unique property because it's a triangular shape in there. Auto beauty specialist was looking for a facility, and they approached the city, and after discussions with the council and such, they were permitted to improve the property grounds and relocate their facilities here to Olivet. And since then, they have been an active partner with the community and a very great company to work with, and one of our top sales tax generators in there. So we work with them accordingly. And in that process, from where they started in Webster Groves to where they are now, they jumped leaps and bounds in terms of size of businesses, and have been using that space pretty adequately. They approached us in terms that there was an opportunity that across the street on Price, and you'll see the facility here on the right in. It is where Paddle and Pickle is located, and also Latch, two new businesses to Olivet in 2024. Under Paddle and Pickle, there is a large warehouse space. This used to belong to Southern Comfort, and I guess they used to store barrels in what would be termed like a basement area. There's some wall exposures on all that, and it's huge, it's big. But because it's in the basement area, it's not the ideal placement for leasing for someone that's looking for exposure. Auto beauty specialist has been in discussions with the property manager in terms of utilizing that basement space to store vehicles as they're going through their process. Right now, they temporarily store some vehicles outside, but it's very rare given the quality or the type of vehicles that they service in there. So they try not to keep them out too long. They can get into some specifics if they like to talk about that. So most of the stuff is being kept in, but because of their business expansion and the success of the business here, they saw an opportunity with this facility to utilize it. So all this would be interior storage in there. And traditionally, I would have handled it as administrative. People apply for a permit, and it becomes a warehouse. And yes, somebody can store cars in there, but because they are the holders of a special permit, which means it is special, and I felt it was in our best interest that they apply and amend their existing special permit to include the storage area that is now going to be across the street. So it's dotting all the i's, crossing all the t's, in best interest, both for the current manager of the property and then also for auto beauty specialists. There's two means to do that. One is that they could come through the commission, be considered a minor amendment, but nothing really gets recorded. It's just a commission approval that's going to be reflected in minutes, or go through the whole special permit process, which can take up to 90 120 days. We think we can do that quickly. What I wanted to get is some discussion from the commission about the sentiments. I think it would be best to go through the special permit process so they can get, again, all the i's and dotted and t's crossed in here, and we can kind of control that basement portion of the property for as long as they're utilizing it. If they leave, then we would want that special permit aspect of it voided. We wouldn't want somebody just to come in and relocate for use for auto services either. So that kind of helps in the control of that process. We've talked to both the property managers and the operators of auto beauty specialists, both being online right now, and they kind of understand what we're trying to do and are willing to work through the process. I just didn't want to go through the procedure if there were concerns or any issues or any thoughts that we should consider in this process.
So is the space being leased or acquired?
It would be leased.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I must be missing a cover page or something, but which are the
No.
both buildings, or I'm not sure which building it
no
is that
problem.
we're talking
That's it.
about.
Auto beauty specialist.
Yeah, I know that. Where's the basement property that? they
This,
wanna
it
go
would be
into?
right
In
here
Caddo,
underneath
okay.
the paddle and pickle.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Speech.
That's right.
Would they drive cars down there? Is there a
Yes,
ramp?
there will be a new drive that would be created here and then a dock door bay. It will have to go down in there. So there'll be some minor modifications on the site ground regarding the parking.
Is there any chance that they're going to want to start doing some manufacturing in that
No.
basement? So it's really just,
Correct. And that's one of the
Storage.
things within the special permit, I can place conditions to control. That if, not to say that they, if the site is suited and they wanted to consider that, then we would want to know so we could and amend the permit to reflect that. At this point, no, they have quite an investment in their existing building here on the left. And they're just looking to really utilize that just to store the vehicles in a covered area, protected while they get transferred back and forth.
yeah. Will that cause traffic issues or anything? I can't imagine.
No different than any distribution facility that would be located in the industrial park.
Okay. I almost don't understand why they'd have to be part of that special permit if it's just,
Again, there are controls. I think it's a good use. And again, we've worked with Auto Beauty since their relocation here. This just gives us an assurance because we know it's Auto Beauty. We know what they're using it to make sure that it's in writing and work with them to do so. As opposed to if we didn't know who the user was going to be, or if we authorize that type of use, how far, we kind of lose control of how we would actually come back to the commission if somebody made the request to get a new special permit for that.
yeah, okay.
So
I
it's
understand.
kind of maybe part of the thought process is these type of users, an auto body facility requires a special permit, and that's why. And this special permit to allow auto beauty do auto body on the site has been granted already. So the city has said, hey, this type of use is okay here. But it kind of said at 1223 North Price. And now that I have space across the street that isn't part of actually doing body work, but it is part of their, it's going to
Yeah.
be part,
Makes sense.
yeah, sorry. But yeah, this is a good way just to make sure all I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everybody knows what's going on. If somebody else was to look at that site and say, hey, I want to store cars, we would allow that administratively. If somebody were to look at the site and say, hey, I want to store cars and work on them, then they have to go for a special permit.
Yes.
So this just kind of keeps us under that control that we're just using this for storage as part of the 1223 operations.
Makes sense. And it
Okay.
keeps it under the same umbrella.
So, okay.
If this is a lease arrangement, one potential concern I have is that they fill up the space with cars. There's a dispute between the parties or the lease is terminated. And now all of a sudden they've got all these cars that they need to remove quickly. Now, maybe the nature of the business is that wouldn't be a problem. They can just move them somewhere else or something like that. But I'm wondering if we should ask for there to be some sort of mechanism where in the event the lease ends, the term ends, whatever it is, some grace be given so that these cars aren't piled up in a parking lot somewhere where they're not supposed to be.
And again, we have representatives from both. Very good question. I think it's worth
It's a good point.
inquiring.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay.
I do have a couple of representatives here, both with the management company and the operators of Auto Beauty. Is it okay if I brought them online?
That'd be great.
Drew and Nick, I'm going to transfer you over as panelists and then should give you the ability to talk and to address the commission. Okay, both of you have transferred over, and then I would ask if you can, on the lower left-hand corner, of course, unmute yourself and allow, if you can allow the video also. Nick, I see you. You're still muted. And Drew, okay. Both of you should be good.
Good evening. How you guys doing?
Good. Thanks.
So Mr. Evola is with Auto Beauty Specialist. Mr. Clary is with Intellica, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Landlord's representative,
Okay.
leasing agent.
So to address the parking question, it's actually a pretty good picture that you have here that may explain this a little bit better. If you look to the east side of our existing building, Auto Beauty Specialist, we call it our side lot. You can see there's several cars there that are double, triple, quadruple parked. That's kind of our issue that we have right now. That's why we're even inquiring about this space, lower level space across the street. So, and I guess in the simplest way of explaining this, if something were to happen to where we needed to remove ourselves from the lease or exit from the lower level, essentially we're just going to revert back to what we do now. So everything is still going to be contained in our existing lot, and we will have to go back to doing that. So we, regardless of our lot space, with the amount of staff that we have, the amount of technicians that we have, we do a really good job of figuring out our capacities for our workflow. And at any given time, we have anywhere from 100 to 130 cars on our lot and on our property, in the front parking lot, back parking lot, side lot, or inside the building. So I guess to answer that question, we know that regardless of a building across the street to help with storage or not, we don't have the capacity to hold more than 120, 130 cars. So essentially everything would revert back to exactly how we do it now. And we would just have to go back to cramming our existing lot and parking that way.
Okay, so there's a natural cap on the amount of cars, and it's not going to be a situation where you fill up this new warehouse space and then you go back to filling up the side lot as well. It's capped at this 120, 130 number.
That is correct. And like I said, that is based on workflow, the amount of our staff, our capacities and what we can actually produce at any given time. And also, kind of one of the things that we often tell our insurance companies or our customers is we are not a storage facility. We especially when vehicles become total losses or they're no longer in the possession of the owner of the vehicle, we reach out to tow companies and the insurance companies to get them picked up immediately, because we don't have the space to store vehicles. So it seems contradictory to us getting a storage facility across the street, but the storage facility, excuse me, the storage facility across the street is just to manage our in-process workflow. Drivable, movable vehicles, not immobile vehicles, those will stay on our existing side lot. So there will be no tow trucks pulling in, trying to get into that drive or that side of the building. Those will all remain on our existing lot.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Carlos, in the special permit, do we have a cap on the number of vehicles that can be on that lot?
No, not on the existing.
Okay.
But is that something that can be discussed and negotiated with the petitioner, the commission wants to?
I don't know if it's ever been a problem, but maybe just to get a reasonable amount that's on there, so it never becomes a problem. Something I just didn't think of, back then. So.
If I could add to the comment as well, I think it's a little different because there's a lot of vehicles and those are, people's everyday cars that they need to drive to work and get around. But a dispute between the parties, it is, it becomes a legal issue. It's, real property and personal property within. So if there ever was a dispute between Auto Beauty and the landlord can't just, lock the doors and lock all those people's cars in there. There's a process. It would have to go through a court. A judge would oversee this and make a reasonable determination and say, okay, even if Nick never paid a month of rent and filled the whole place up, they couldn't just lock the doors and keep people's cars in there.
And you wouldn't necessarily tow all those vehicles out of that space.
Well, I think it's also a liability issue for the landlord as well. If there was a dispute between the parties, that would be one of the first things that you would want out of there. It's like, hey, there's, this, I kind of liken it to, I've been doing this for 10 or 11 years. Sometimes you do have tenants that vacate or there's a dispute between the parties. Copiers, for example, telecommunications equipment, a lot of the time, coffee machines, those items are usually leased through a third party. You can't just take someone's copier because they didn't pay you rent, right? You have to go through the process. So the landlord wouldn't want to tow the vehicles, but they would want them out of there. And I don't think they'd want the liability to even mess with it. I think it'd be part of the default judgment to try and recoup the rent. And it would say, we need you to vacate the premises. And I guess in the very unlikely event that, let's say, Auto Beauty just skipped town and left, then the landlord might be responsible for getting that property out of the property, that real property, personal property out of the real estate, and return it to the parties. But it's such an unlikely scenario. And again, there's a legal process for how you handle personal property in default judgment like that.
Yeah. I mean, I can come up with hypothetical scenarios all day about,
Yeah. It's a valid point, and there's a ton of it. This is not copiers and coffee machines. I mean, this could be 100, $50,000 cars on average that all belong to other people. So it's a very good point. I just do, and I don't know, I guess there is a legal process, but again, I see your point. If there were a ton of cars in there and they all belong to other people and they needed them back, it would be a challenging situation, I guess. But there is something in place for it.
Even
And
outside of a dispute, let's say the warehouse floods and you need
Yeah.
to remove all the cars. So I think the
Yeah.
fact you're telling me that there's a cap on the amount of cars, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. My concern was that, this sounds like it's a successful business. It's only going to get more successful if the lot fills up and the side lot fills up, and then you run out of room. But if you're telling me that there's a cap on the amount of cars, it sounds like it's maybe not as big of a concern.
Cool.
Any other questions or comments with commission members? Any further discussion, Carlos?
No, we'll get the paperwork ready for the February 6th meeting, and go through that process. It would be, I think, the best. Again, it just make sure all these are covered, and we can talk about with the operators if they want to place a number or they have an idea.
And while we have audience members, is there any audience members that have any comments related to this? Seeing none, I guess, thank you, Nick and Drew. Appreciate you guys coming online.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, and it is item B, discussions regarding commission reviews. Are these personal reviews on us? Carl?
You're up first, Rob.
Yeah, well, you didn't tell me about this, Carlos.
There's- All right, so given that we just had that one item, there was an opportunity to have some discussions or continued discussions on some of the items we've been looking into in there. And this is regarding the commission reviews, which was somewhat tied with the changes we were looking in the tree protection, preservation, and replacement. And then also talk about accessory structures just a bit. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on each one of these items in there, get some commission thoughts, and the hope is right now February 6th is looking as a pretty limited agenda item where we can have more discussion on these and hopefully some more some codified prints on these items. So on the commission reviews, again, the goal is, the issue we have right now is there is an artificial deadline that's set by the current ordinance, and we will get bombarded on one specific day for everybody thinking that they're going to be on a commission agenda within 30 days from that day in there. And the code says that we have, I believe it is 10 days to make a decision whether they're going to be on or not, or else they're on in there. And sometimes we can handle that. But sometimes we have several petitions that it becomes an issue of trying to manage those, or we start to miss things here and there. And over over time, we've also expanded what we review. We expanded into more stormwater. We're now starting to talk about trees. We had the guidelines and other things that we've added in there. Petitions have gotten better, but there are still things that we have to go through and check, and we've done checklists and all that. But if we are overwhelmed, it is difficult to meet that, and things do get missed, or we don't get to spend the quality time we'd like to have on these petitions. So we want to get rid of that aspect and instead have a decision of when the item is placed on the agenda will be based on the staff's review. And once the staff finds that the agenda is fully complete, then it'll come to the commission at its next scheduled meeting. So therefore, you can apply whenever you want. We're going to review it, and if everything is good, we should be able to expedite your process to get to the commission. If it's not, we're going to be able now to hold you up until we have a fully completed application. Again, before the 10 days was good, but we've expanded. We didn't increase the number of slices in the pie. We just made the pie bigger in there. So we're trying to handle all these. And then of course there is an expectation that we respond in a proper manner. So we're asking, it's changing the 10 days to 15 days. So in 15 days, we'll make that decision. And then we've been talking about internally about these, checklists and things that go through real quickly, and how to respond and utilize email more effectively as opposed to writing correspondence and things like that. So that will help us tremendously in terms given the resources we have. And again, it also helps, spread, applications, because petitioners are really cognizant that they have to submit at a certain time by a certain date, or else they're out. And I think we want to get rid of that mindset in there. And then a lot of the times, regardless of who those petitioners represent, the story is, well, the city, didn't get to it, or the city's kicking us out, and it's not the intent. And our role is not to explain it to everybody of why something didn't make it in there. So this will, I think, will help both in the city's image and also in our process of expediting reviews. Okay.
Carlos, how long does it take you to assess whether they have a complete submittal?
We have a pretty good checklist, I believe. It's just given all the other tasks during the day, is finding the time to sit down and then just focus on one project and go through the whole aspect of it. And there are little things that could be missing that could be consequential down the road. I mean, so it could be, that they forgot to identify an elevation of a neighboring property. In there, and there, those are small little things in there, but we've created a checklist to go through to make sure all these things are in place, how to utilize that checklist to highlight, this is why this is not complete, in there to shift those requirements to them. And then there is a professional assessment. So it's not about a checklist, it's using your professional backgrounds and experience and evaluating and making an assessment on a project in there. And you want them to have that in advance and an understanding of why. So that does take, in some of these, it does take time. It may be 30 minutes, but again, within all the tasks of the day and the phones and all that, that 30 minutes can get spread out to almost a week before you get, well, it's not just spending 30 minutes, but accumulating 30 minutes that you were able to put that together. Yeah.
I just wonder if they're gonna give you some, they're gonna be upset that they don't have an idea if they're on the agenda or not.
No, I think right now, I think it will be more productive than the current process. And not that they're submitting, I think there's pressure on them. It's like, I gotta meet a date, I gotta meet a date, I gotta meet a date. And then there's like, I'm just bombarded, everything comes in and then things are slowly supplementing, like the date's on a Tuesday, but then we'll get an email on a Wednesday and we get a supplement email on a Friday. And by that time, we haven't even looked at it yet because we were looking at the other ones. And it's like, well, okay, we'll add it on in there. I think this will help try to expedite that in there and relieve, where they feel like they're not, again, talking with them, with some of the developers, is that they're not under pressure that something has to come in at a certain time.
And do you think sometimes they feel that pressure and they're turning in incomplete submittals?
We get, and we try to work with them and there, or we get lenient saying, okay, yeah, just get that in. I'm not going to get to it, so just submit it by Friday and all that. And there are some decisions that we have to make just being out of courtesy.
Okay. Makes sense.
So again, the goals here would be to extend the review time allocated, eliminate the reference to a deadline, and then to ensure the complete petitions are forwarded to the commission on a timely manner. Again, we don't want to use this as an opportunity to take more time in the review, but to actually do a thorough review and ensure that these are all done consistently.
Yeah.
So
Huge.
15 days.
15 days for that initial to make a determination. You did get everything that we asked for in. And if you did not, then we're sending it back. And when you send it back, we'll take a look at it.
Calculate when you send back, it's another 15 days for you?
Not necessarily. I think we look and determine, what's in there and then decide what meeting they would go to. Is that fair enough?
Do you all do any kind of pre-application meetings so that you can advise a potential applicant? These are the things that we're going to be looking for.
Mhm.
And I know that it gets buried and, that information's out there. It's in the website, it's on your packets, but sitting down with somebody and saying, well, let's have a pre-application meeting so that you are very aware of what we're looking for and why we have these deadlines. If you get your stuff in by X day, you are likely to be on the agenda unless somehow you're missing some information.
For the larger, I don't know how to put the term in, well, not just larger projects, but those that are more professionally done. They take advantage and utilize that process. Our code does permit it in there. But for these single family residential, the McKelveys will, but Dub homes won't. In there, and many of them just out of experience know our process. And there are some of them will call in advance to say, what do you think of this? And it's like, okay. But not request like a formal sit down meeting or review. Now, in the review, there are some times where after we've done our analysis that we'll call them. If we find something that I don't want to, that is significant, that warrants some attention and some reasoning of why, based on past experiences of what the commissions have reviewed and approved, that we would have them come in, sit down and talk about it and get a better understanding of whether the why or why it should be changed.
I've been on many of these meetings with other cities before, and all that any developer asks or any contractor asks is that the person be open to ideas and talk to them and know what's expected and do it in a reasonable manner. That's all that's anybody expects in in the world in our industry. So
Seeing no further discussion on this, I think let's move on to the next one. Carlos, and that's tree protection, preservation and replacement.
Correct. Continuing on the tree protection, preservation, replacement. The goal here is in terms from an administrative perspective and going through the commission process and during construction, how best to ensure that significant trees are protected, that there are preservation standards put in place to ensure the protection of those trees, and then for those being removed, what are the replacement criteria? And then we've kind of talked about this. There's nothing new in here to add, and things that we've been incorporating under their current review processes, as you have seen. All recent submissions have been submitting an arborist report. We think we have it down of what we want to start seeing standard in all the arborist reports. We had one issue that Jack's been struggling with is you get a surveyor engineer who's contracted by the developer to identify all the trees, and then you have a developer calling an arborist to go do an assessment of all the trees in there. But in no way is the engineer, surveyor, or the arborist, in their contracts are to talk to each other. So Jack will find, well, where did this tree come from, or where is this tree, or you're saying this tree stays, he's saying this, he or she's saying this tree's gone, and all that. So we're talking about how to better coordinate that in there, so what the expectations are. The expectations that we're looking at is that the engineer surveyor would be responsible for all the measurement and identification of the trees, but they take their responsibility of identifying health and whether they're being removed or not, and ensure that that goes to the arborist, and that the arborists use the engineer surveyor's information. So they can't get contracted until the surveyor or engineer is done. And then instead of creating their own little site plan, that they utilize the information that was provided in there, and therefore they carry the responsibility that there was something missing. Then they can talk amongst themselves up to the developer, of course, but we don't want to be the mediator in between. In addition to that then we would do our assessment, and then also look at where some of these gaps are in that process. And there was a couple of things we had talked about on those standards that you were having a.
So I kind of talked about just the arborist report and how it would fit with the site plan, but then we were kind of picturing it as, you would get your typical site plan. It would have not the identification, but the location of those trees. And then as a response, like instead of getting a 4-page site plan, you get a 5-page site plan. The 5th one is just solely, what trees are deemed to be removed. And they would take that information. I don't know if that would be by the surveyor, or how we would need to facilitate that. But then it's like you get your stormwater plan and you have all of that drainage and all that information. And then you go to the 5th page and it's exactly kind of like the arborist report that you've seen with the site plan that was prepared by them, but then it's not taking both of the information together. I think it's just would be helpful because we've run into some issues where, sometimes we get an arborist report after something's been approved and they're changing a tree now, and now it's that site plan needs to be updated so that information is accurate, that it depicts the actual, what trees are supposed to be removed. So it's kind of a gray area that we're trying to figure out right now, but it's going to be best to, separate us being the mediator for it.
Yeah, you're doing their job.
So the next part would be establishing what is going to be the significant tree designation, at what size is that in all costs we want you to try to avoid, what sizes are we going to require you to start to replace, and what are just trees that are, whether they're in the buildable areas, that it's okay if they're removed or not. And there will become issues and decisions that will have to be made on those, but I think we want to make sure that through the arborist report, if there are quality trees of a significant size, that we want to do what we can to try to minimize the disruption and their removal in there, but also recognize the property owner's rights that if it's in the buildable area and within their setbacks, you know, that they maintain the ability to remove those if they're doing an addition or putting a pool and all that, but then that we have a system in place of how that would be mediated. Meaning this one will be removed, and because it is a tree of this specific size, the city's expectation is that you're gonna replace or provide something in lieu of that. Of course, not in the same place, but move those around on the property. Okay.
But
And then again,
hopefully they'll be there and they'll fall in love with the tree. You know.
but
and
it could be,
adjust their future plans.
again, but we have to look at it in terms that they may already be there and like that tree, but they also are making improvements to their property.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not necessarily, you know, this is one of the things we've been trying to stress. This is not to apply to just new home construction. There's a lot of property owners in all of that are removing trees.
Yes.
In there, and this is how we're going to try to best manage those that go through the permitting process.
And so let me ask a question here, because as I watch 4 houses around my house, literally cut down healthy trees, whereas I ended up throughout 25 years of getting rid of dead trees so they don't fall on my home. You know, these people have made a choice that they don't want trees in their yard. So, you know, I'm coming as a devil's advocate here saying, you know, this is gonna be something for the future and you guys, but, you know, how do you make a private homeowner? You know, how do you know when a private homeowner is getting rid of a tree? I mean, you would know unless you were sitting in my,
Like, oh,
my, sitting in my den watching these trees being, you know, taken down for 3 days. It takes 3 days to get these trees down. That's how huge they are.
But there, if I can comment, and that, but their mayor and council liaison. The directive of the council was not to come up with a tree preservation ordinance for the entire city. The directive of the council was to come up with regulations and requirements for the tree protection, removal, and replacement during construction, and that's during a permit. My department is not a forestry or arborist department, nor will it be in there. That's going to be a decision that the city will have to make and then decide how they are going to operate and fund that. So in terms of if you wanted to cut down your tree, you know, calling the Department of Planning and Community Development, and we don't have ordinances or regulations to tell that person no, or what is the health or.
So maybe maybe I misunderstood or misheard what I was hearing, because I initially really thought this was solely for when you're building new homes. But I thought I heard you say eventually this is going to be something for anyone who wants to get rid of a tree, and that's not a
If
new
they-
home.
only if they have a project.
Yes.
It's only if there's a
I
project.
mean, such as an addition or
pool.
something of that
Yeah,
nature.
right.
Cool.
Exactly.
All right.
I don't think
okay,
it's triggered by
Okay.
code enforcement
Okay.
or what have you.
Okay, that's where, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, because
yeah.
that, you know, I'm not seeing it for other projects or people. I'm seeing it, this is what I'm doing because I don't want this to eventually fall in my home.
No.
So, okay,
But
okay.
I do want to note, because there are some advocates here for it, that within our comprehensive plan, I mean, it does envision us going to something with a broader enforcement regarding the trees. The directive, at least at this point right now, is regarding those that go through my department in the permitting process. And those are what we're addressing in there. I think down the road, though, the city is going to have a discussion and they're going to have to make the decisions on where that including where that enforcement, where that funding, where the resources will be for something like that.
But I thought I was hearing.
Yeah. Carlos, let me ask you a question about talking about tree size diameter. Would that need to vary depending on the type of tree?
It's a good question, because they start getting and then very complex. My goal is to, lack of a better word, again, I apologize, this is not necessarily to dumb this down in terms of the ordinance, but for the understanding on the enforcement process in there. So where the inspector is pretty clear and doesn't have to make judgment calls that are beyond their expertise or profession in there. So we'll have an arborist report. It'll call a tree out in there, and it'll call a diameter and and such. If we want to create a scale or model of like, you know, because this is this type of species of trees, instead of it being, you know, I'm just going to throw a number out, 21 inches, anything 8 inches or more on these type of trees should be kept. It starts, it's doable, but it starts to get more complex in there. Also, ordinances are organisms and they consistently change and grow in there. And I can see where over time we need to make tweaks and adjustments, or there are specific trees that we want to add, you know, where we've now had a couple, you know, some time of experience of how we're doing this and is it working, that we can then add or adjust in there. Not saying I'm opposed to that, but I am cognizant with the resources we have and how that's going to be managed. And that's one of the things I just have to balance.
Yeah, I get it. Sounds complicated.
So could you explain then, we don't have a city paid, and I don't mean employee, but just contracted with whomever, an arborist for our own independent look at a space? Cause I'm looking at, you know, the trees on Stacy Drive and, you know, their list and everything needs to go because it's in poor condition. Have I ever read an arborist report that said they're all in great condition, keep them?
Mhm.
No, I never have. And so I just wondered how us getting independent information is possible. And do we ever seek independent information from our own departments, Parks and Rec, whatever?
We have not in there, but also the level of priority in terms of the tree protection is higher now than it has been in the past. Similar to stormwater, we went ahead and we went that route where we hired an independent consultant to review the other consultant's product. And I could see where this may go to there. I'm not sure yet because we haven't tried it.
Right.
And you are correct in there. And we've seen like the Stacy report, but that state, and I think Chairman can back me up on this, that property had been abandoned for such a long time that most of those trees hadn't been maintained and got through quite a bit.
Even
in
the
there,
ones
so
that
that-
they were trying to keep. Didn't look.
But I think, you know, when Don, Jack, or I review these, I mean, the expectation is that we should be doing some pushback or getting some better understanding in there. And then, you know, there may be some questions from the commission that we have to go that route. You know, I'm not opposed to it. It's just another layer that gets added to that process. But so does the importance to the community, and they may feel that it is warranted.
We are a city of old trees.
But it is interesting too, because I mean, that you're right, that property has not been maintained. So likely hasn't been deadwooded, hasn't been kept up. So it may look worse now than if somebody kept those trees, you know, maintained them. And, you know, how do we know if they could be, you know,
Do you know how to maintain your trees?
do I know?
Yeah.
We hire an
Yeah,
arborist.
exactly. But my point is, you know, we, the homeowner, we don't know, you know,
Yeah.
you think you're doing the right thing. I will indicate, you know, quite a few years ago, I had gumball tree in my mother's house. I thought I'd hire a professional guy to deal with trimming the limbs down and doing it the right way. And he ended up creating an imbalance to the tree and the roots began to pull out from the one side. You know, this is really
It's a challenge.
it is a challenge. Yeah.
That's where you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. And
So-
there's a lifespan of trees.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other drawback, you know, and I'm not sure if there's a way that you can, you know, maybe gauge the lifespan, you know, is it a new tree? Is it a middle-aged tree, you know, or, you know, a tree that's kind of in its senior years, you know what I mean? And that may be of concern, you know, especially if it's near a house and within 5 years or 10 years, then it needs to come down, you know?
So the conservation department of the state are identifying, you know, obnoxious weeds, you know, inappropriate trees and vegetation that should not be in our communities. And so, you know, what, 2 years ago, they identified 5, and every year, they're identifying more invasive type or dangerous forms, things, and you know what? That process is like only 15 years old, and this community is 95 years old. So, yeah, it's tough.
But once in place with getting a handle on the protection component of it would be the preservation of those that are to be protected in the inspection process in there. And then again, I have to handle it from, we have very good qualified building inspectors uh, in there. These gentlemen are not arborists or horticulturalists in there, but that they understand and also can visualize what those standards are. How far, a diameter has to be and protection from a tree, or what type of things have to be put in place on the ground. If plywood and things to protect those trees, that they are going to understand and enforce through the construction process. We are not on every site every day. And their sites can go a couple of months before they get inspected. So we want to make sure that these are visual, that they're clearly seen in there, and that they can be able to manage these in the process. And then also, what we found out from other communities in our discussions, and then through this process, that a lot of times, and what you see here is perfect and all that, but at the end of the day, the paper didn't work to what was in the design, or something had to be removed, and to establish the procedures and process of how changes to that would be done and to make sure to have a justification process in there. And then finally would be the replacement standard, and these are for addressing both protection and preservation. So what to set the standards for the tree replacements, require landscape plans, which the commission's been asking for submission, and minimize, more importantly, the poor placement of some of these trees that was done in the past. And that is under utilities, or whether above ground, underground, or just in areas that were probably not the best place to be putting those original.
I think this Stacy Drive was kind of an interesting case because, they thought that as soon as they got rid of that house and they filled up the basement area, that they wouldn't have a water issue. And now they have actually a worse water issue than they had when the house was there. But then, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but she mentioned, trees and vegetation helps with stormwater. And so, yes, we're quick to say, yeah, sure, demolish it, instead of protect. And, you may be losing the very protection you really do want. And so I think it is important for us to really know what kinds of trees and where they are, and not necessarily be so quick to say, oh, it's in poor condition, cut it down.
Well, there's other vegetation
Yeah.
too besides
What?
trees.
And there is other,
So-
absolutely, absolutely. But trees are important, and they can hold up a whole side of a house. So, but I think we need to be cognizant of that, is that it's not always just replacement. We need to really be thoughtful about preservation.
So if I can add to Commissioner Powell's, because as we were going through this process, we were kind of thinking in the mindset of things that are coming to the commission in there, and how the normal process comes in before you see the application for a new home. We haven't even seen the application for a demolition permit. 15 Stacy is a good example. There is nothing in the code that prohibits somebody from demoing their property at any time, whether they've applied for commission review or for the building permit yet. And somebody did about 4 years ago in there, and then, left the site vacant in its current condition and such. We have situations where probably 1 out of 15 or 20 houses that come to the commission, the house has already been demoed. So it's like, well, what good is the arborist report at the commission level if they already clear cutted everything? So the one thing that you would have here that that does go through an administrative process is that now that if you are going to just apply for the demolition of the house, which again, anybody can do if they want to, you now do have to submit an arborist report. Now that is going to be assessed and reviewed administratively, but that was the only way to get that into place. And something that, again, we control through permitting, but doesn't necessarily have to come through the commission. All right, so those would be the standards in there. You know, I had drafted some text from at our last meeting in December, copying different things from different communities that you know probably were a lot further ahead from where we are, only to come to an understanding that, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had our goals in this process clearly identified, and here they are. So we can impose, you know, what those criteria would be. There were some things I think in the last thing about the use of chemicals and stuff, and that again, that was beyond the expertise of our inspectors, and probably something that, you know, I take responsibility, shouldn't have cut and copied. You know, these have to be enforceable within the resources that the city has right now. And again, ordinances are organic, they modify, they change, and, you know, once these are in place, there is the ability to continue to tweak these, to improve these, or to expand these over time.
Yeah.
It's not a one time and that's it.
Moving in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we would take any commission comments or.
Anybody have any commission comments?
I think you hit it right on the head. I think that we need to make it very simple for you guys and simple for the contractors. So make sure everybody's on the same page, that it's very black and white, that there's not a lot of gray area. How big, how size the tree is, it's very easy to measure. You know, those kind of things. I think that's where we need to be at.
Yeah. And get them doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get on the right page, or at least on
Yeah,
the right foot forward.
exactly.
All right,
Okay.
continue on.
Yeah. Well, is there any members in the audience that wish to have any public comments related to this? Go ahead.
Just a few comments. Stephanie Todd, 7 Heather Hill Lane. Just some comments and, so you talked, so a suggestion, why don't you have, you could have, it seems like the certified arborist report should be submitted along with the site plan instead of one after the other. And I don't know, I got the impression that they first do one and then they do another. And I know, you know, the city doesn't have the expertise, but maybe you could have a list of like approved arborist or something that the city could, you know, that the developer then could choose from. So back to, I think, Commissioner Powell's point, you know, they hire some arborist buddy and you know, I don't know. I mean, but they're still certified, but you know, have an approved list of arborists, and hopefully they would be, you know, neutral.
I think that we might be able to determine that over time
Yeah,
based on experience that we have, and maybe call it a preferred list.
right.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And then you could kind of be assured that, okay, this guy did it, so I can trust him
Right.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
help.
And it does help when you see the same engineers that come in and you know that they do good work and they know what they're doing. It gives you reassurance.
Right. And I didn't hear it tonight, but I thought it's in there that when the arborist says that the tree, or the site plan says the tree needs to be removed, that you have a reason why, you know, like the house is in the way or so
That's typically part of it.
that's what I thought.
And the first part that you were talking about is really trying to get the location of the trees identified
Right.
by the surveyor and then have the arborist come in and talk about it.
Oh,
Because those two were drawings, different drawings, and they didn't always match up. And so now there's a question as to, okay, really, where is this tree located? So get the surveyor to do it first, then the arborist can come in and work off of that survey.
yeah.
You know, so that way everything matches.
Right.
one-on-one.
Right. And then what I was saying is then submit both at the same time to
That would be.
Carlos. Don't submit the site plan and then the arborist comes in later.
That's exactly what what the intent is.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I guess I'm,
It's not separate submittals, but just separate phases of
Right.
that they need to do.
okay, all right. And then, I thought Jack had a draft ordinance to the, I thought like 6 months, a long time ago, like 6 months or so, I thought he had a draft ordinance to work from.
We looked at a couple different cities.
Okay, that's what I was
That's-
gonna say too. A
yeah.
lot of cities have ordinances.
No, we were looking at different cities and taking parts of theirs and looking at different parts.
Because that
That's
might
what we've been
be
working on.
a good thing to actually put it in writing and then go and edit it instead of just having kind of discussions all the time. I mean, for me,
We're
when I'm-
getting there. We're
Okay.
getting there.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, we need to get through some of the items, because if you just draft it, there's a lot of different options that you could go with.
right,
And then trying to figure out, okay, when we start seeing other cities, some cities use different approaches.
yes,
And then, well, you start realizing how that could complicate and may not work well with the city.
right,
So that's what Carlos is doing,
okay,
is kind of going through that, trying to find something that's going to work well with his inspectors. Take some of those aspects and then talk about it and see if that makes sense before they start drafting it.
okay, because yeah, I thought Carlos
We'll have
already.
time to tweak.
Well, and see, I guess maybe draft is too strong a word. I mean, if you have something on paper, then you have something concrete that you can then read and say, this isn't working, this, or we need to specify this, this, and this. But to just keep talking, it's, I don't know.
We'd like to talk.
I know,
You know?
but nothing gets done. No, I'm kidding.
We're working on it. We're working on it, but we're trying, like I said, to kind of work through some of these, you know, the different options before we draft every option that's out there, you know,
Right.
and waste time too.
Right,
And sometimes when you're drafting something brand new and you're looking at other people's, what they did, it's a little overwhelming. You know,
Yeah.
and so trying to get that structure, how it's gonna work, you know, for all of that is key,
Yeah.
you know. And that now I think that's what we're doing, is trying to develop the framework, trying to understand the goals, trying to understand exactly, you know, what, we don't have the exact plan, but I
Right.
think we got an idea, a roadmap in place to
Okay.
build upon.
okay. And then back what I think was said, yeah, keep it simple. So in my mind, I think I see like a table. A tree size this diameter you replace with, you know, like, or a point. I think some cities have like a point system or something. This tree is 10 points, so then you have to, you know, something like that.
Trying to work through, but having the point system in place with different trees, different things, makes it difficult for our current inspectors who aren't arborists, who might have varying degrees of knowledge of trees.
Oh, and
you
see
know,
that's
and being able to keep it consistent.
and
That's what we're working
and
through.
see that's what I'm saying. Don't focus on like species. Just say, and you know, if you have a 20-inch tree, you replace it with 3 4-inch trees or
That's exactly,
10 bushes.
I think,
You know,
I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
yeah, okay.
So yeah, we're on the same page.
All right. And then the other thing, I don't, you know, there's experts out there that have helped. I know there's people that have helped the other cities. I
Yeah.
know that there's an arborist and a landscaper that has helped Ladue. And so I don't know if you're working with experts that,
I think we've been using some internal resources and looking out, you know, right now to try to kind of pull it together, you know, ourselves.
Yeah, and
'Cause otherwise,
we've
to-
had discussions with the chief building official, with Ladue, Frontenac, and Clayton. So we're all in the same circle, so
Yeah.
yes.
and like
Now-
Heath City is a tree city in Kirkwood. They're both, so they're kind of.
Now,
more
what
with it.
we have not done is talk directly to their arborists or their consultants. Again, I'm talking to my peers.
Yeah.
Just of what I know.
I know Ladue used, I don't know if he was officially a consultant, but he was, I know they did use somebody that owned both a landscaping firm and was a certified arborist to help them with theirs.
It's a good idea, but also that could be, if we run into issues, that could be the next step.
Okay, all right,
Yeah. Very good.
that's my comments.
Thank you.
I'll be quick because we've covered a lot already. Kate Pishon Hellman, 800 North Price. just a few things that I think really need to be emphasized is that the plans need to be from a certified arborist and not a landscape designer who's parading as, like you need that sticker that says this person is a certified arborist. So that's really important because they can gauge those things like lifespan, size, health, trimming versus removal to a much more expert degree.
Good.
And then I really appreciate how this conversation is looking at trees as though they are items of value on a property as opposed to a nuisance. And I really appreciate that that's the tone of the conversation and what I kind of hear underlying all of that. I think that starting from that place is really great value, both now and in the future as we deal with the changing climate. And then a thought that just came to me is thinking about possibly looking at this idea in the same way that the codes and the design guidelines work hand in hand, where you have the standards set in place with the codes, but then there's also that kind of narrative version, like what we have for the design guidelines, that help to flesh out and maybe provide examples so that it's clearer for the developers, it's clear for the homeowners to have a sense that way. And then just a question, Carlos, when you said that there's no requirement for a demolition project to have a permit, is that currently the case that there's no demo permit that's required?
Sorry if I misspoke. No, you are required to have a permit in there. Those are issued administratively, and there is no requirement right now that's codified that says that they have to submit even a site plan, like in the depth that you see that come before the commission for their reviews.
Right.
So someone can have a simple boundary survey and X the house and
Right.
and then it provides enough information to know what's going on the property. If the priority or the thought of trying to maintain some of that treescape isn't there, and it hasn't been for that process.
So is the hope that the demo permit process as a separate entity would now include more of the site plan and the
We would
landscape?
require them to submit an arborist report, whether
Okay.
they're gonna build the house now or later.
And that would be separate from, but in tandem with what's going on with this specific piece about
With
trees.
this change, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one online, which is good. Any other further discussion? Go ahead, Jack.
I just like to note that I think
Jack, you need to state your name and address.
Jack Carswell, I don't actually know my address off the top of my head because I live in an apartment. Oh, okay. Well, then 1140 Dealman Road. There we go. I'd like to say majority. I want to say from the top of my head, all of the arborist reports that we've seen with the previous projects have all been from Frontenac Forestry. And most of the developers will all use that same company or I guess, yeah, we'll just use Frontenac Forestry and then we just go off of that and they have all of their information indicated on that report for the arborists and numbers and contact information as well.
Certified?
I'm
Yes.
pretty sure, yes. Yep.
Yeah, good.
Yep. Then it's it's the frequent one. I guess it's the top arborist that most developers are using that we've seen.
And I think the term, I mean, we've been using the term, but we want an arborist report, not a landscaper's report. So all those that have been submitted, they have their little stamp or press that they're certified, yes.
We sometimes, staff also will request it. So we've run into some situations with demo too. It just makes sense for us to have the arborist report because then we can see what trees were on the lot. For instance, 15 Stacy is a great example of that. They demoed it 4 years ago. And then, you come in now wanting to build this house, at least when they demoed it, we know what trees were existing on the lot at that time. So we can see and then gauge from there how that replacement would work in the future.
Wait till you get up to the podium.
Susan Colhagen, 27 Forsythia. So if it's a demolition only and you require an arborist report, could you tell them they have to preserve some, I mean, they're gonna be included in this, like, even though they're not building right now, you can't take certain of those trees down, is that?
We're
gonna-
we're gonna want to know why.
Okay, so it's gonna
And
be the
this-
same thing, that you
if
may
that-
not
if all their
allow them
intent
to
is
take
to-
everything.
If their intent is just to take the house down, then why are they furthering? Now, if within our arborist report, there's some identification that something is in very poor health or looks
Oh,
bad,
yeah.
we would authorize them, but we want to know what's coming down on the lot, both man-made and natural.
Yeah, so it's okay, so they might have when you give them the permit and say, yes, it might be, except for this and this and this and this has to be left. So you would be already preserving trees, even though it's just a demolition.
And it would be applied, whatever trees they've removed would be applied to the system that we have in place for replacement.
Yes, cool, all right, thank you. I really appreciate that you're all doing this.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move on to item D, accessory structure regulations. Carlos or Jack? Carlos.
I'll talk a little bit on this one also. So given the, last week's meeting, we had some discussions regarding our accessory structures ordinance or the regulations we have in there. And it was I just want to give some background so the commission's fully aware of how we got to the current process. So I think before 2015, 2019, the old ordinance for accessory structures consisted of, I think it was like 4 short paragraphs. And basically it said you can have an accessory structure. It has to be 10 feet from another structure. Number 4 was that, it had the distances from the side and rear yard setbacks. And then the final condition was that it can't exceed 30% of your rear yard area. So if you took, look, Jack, that each accessory structure could not exceed over 30% of your rear yard area. So in that, it never said that you had to go to the commission. It was all done administratively. And again, if you had a typical lot, which is 100-foot wide by 150-foot depth, your rear yard is going to be 30 feet. So you're going to have, 30 times 100, 30,000 square feet back there. And you could build up to a 900 square foot enclosed structure. And that's just if you had the typical lot. You had a bigger lot, you can get a lot more and all that. And it didn't say that that only applied to one or that you couldn't. It only said that that applied to one. So it didn't say you couldn't have 2 at the same amount or more. So it put us administratively staff in a bad position because we would get concerns and people were pushing the envelopes with, wanting 2-car garages and things of that nature on some of these smaller lots. So and then in 2015, 2019, we completely overhauled the accessory regulations and we identified all the possible type of accessory structures, in work session discussions with the commission. And what we did is that we put caps on what administratively we could issue independently via building permit in there. And then if there was anything bigger than the cap, it was to go to the commission. And this helped my staff in terms to ensure that, they were, that they weren't making any, difficult choices of, I think this is too big. But, the responsibilities on me to issue the permit or do the permit review. It would bring those difficult ones to the commission where then you guys as a body, discuss and work as a consensus of what is okay or not in that process. And it worked pretty well. And then, I think for the most part, flat work has become like the biggest item that comes to the commission in there. And those we usually utilize the commission as a tool to get further concessions on stormwater controls on it. It's like it's going to go to the commission. The stormwater is going to be the big issue. We're going to have to resolve that, and they're more likely to do it because they got to go to the commission than if we were just kind of telling them you got to do this or so. And we gotten to a point that we've gotten really good, and it's now pretty much anticipated that we may come to you in the future to increase that size. But anyway, the intent though, through the discussions as we redid the ordinance was, we never looked at how much is too much of a request. And should the commission also have a cap within itself? And I think there, based on what we've seen in a couple of past petitions, that might be something under consideration. Because again, when somebody comes in for an accessory structure, which could be a pool, a big patio, big gazebo, uh, uh, detached garage, a pole barn, or so. The intent was they were going to be over the square footage that we administratively had, and we had most of the square footages that the commission gave us authorities. Like we can approve a 2-car garage, the simple 500, 600 square feet. But I don't think we want to be responsible for approving an 800 or 900 square foot garage in there, and that's why we wanted those to come into the commission. There were a couple of hundred square feet. But what happens when it's double or triple that? We're now putting the pressure. What we were concerned about now on the commission to make those assessments, because there isn't a cap on what you should be in there. So I think one of our community values, and I think that is good, is that we don't mind residents having an accessory structure or detached garage in there. If you have even if you have a 3-car brand new house with attached garage and all that, and you need more room, I mean, adding another 800 square feet, and if you got the appropriate size is okay. But having the 3-car garage and adding another 6-car garage component, I don't think that was the true spirit and intent of what we were trying to do. And at some point, that uh, you know that there should be a cap, or going, limiting a height of 15 feet and then somebody coming in with 40 feet, or so. I don't think the intent is that you could come to the commission and ask 3 times what we would have been authorized to do in there. So anyway, we wanted to have that discussion, make sure that the commission understood how the code worked. Those numbers that are identified, those caps, are applied to us staff administratively. Those are what you have authorized us and felt comfortable that we can evaluate, review. Anything in excess of that we bring to the commission. So as a consensus, you guys can evaluate and determine what is too much or what is, reasonable in there. So we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware in there. And then in the future, that we may want to talk about that we should incorporate some type of caps. Now, this wouldn't apply to anything that's current. Talking about, as lessons learned, we may want to consider, establishing that, that the commission can authorize maybe, 25% more than what I authorized to do, but definitely not 3 times, the amount in there. And in the end of the day too, there would still be a variance process. So if they were above what the commission approved, they could go to the Board of Adjustment. So there's different layers in there, but they'll have to have a really rational reason why they need that. And who knows, somebody may not in there. The other thing is, the term accessory structure means it's accessory to something. It's not the primary structure that is the residence typically on the house. And in the definitions, it uses a term that it's supposed to be subordinate to. So we should keep in mind, and that's not one thing that we haven't been doing on our end, is like really looking at if you have the principal structure of the home on there, you know, should what you're allowed to do equal or exceed what you already have in there. And this doesn't apply to the last petition specifically, but how do you consider this being subordinate to the principal structure? And that's
So
the
like
discussion.
that apartment over the garage starts to look less like an accessory structure and its own independent structure.
Yeah, well, not just in the visual, but once you start counting square footages, so we counted the footprint, but you count the footprint on the second floor, then things start to add up. Or should it be taller than the principal structure?
Right.
There are things like that, and it's hard to disassociate from the current petition we have, but I think it opened up, some discussions that we need to start to considering or take a look at for future
Can I just
purposes.
ask a question? Because I want to go back to this idea that it can't exceed 30%. So you could have a garage, doesn't exceed 30%, and a shed that doesn't exceed 30%, a new pool and a gazebo and a patio. And now you're at not a blade of grass or shrub or tree anywhere on the property. Am I understanding that right?
That's the way the ordinance was previous. And that's why we changed it.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay,
changed. That's what I want
understand.
to make sure.
Be
It's
sure.
not
Okay,
allowed
we have
now.
changed that. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
'Cause I'm like, wait a minute. This is why we have stormwater problems.
Well, and honestly, and I know several of you are familiar with, but we have one subdivision that, I mean, many of those lots don't have much grass left.
Right.
In there, and and they were compliant with the standards of the code.
At the time,
There,
yeah.
and yeah, over time,
They maximize the buildable space.
mhm.
You know. This is very interesting, and it's not that I'm opposed to what you're saying at all, but I think it just varies depending on the size of the property. I mean,
Oh, definitely. That's how the current system is set up. We use the tiered system in there, and I think, you know, if we look at, again, the larger the property, the commission's given us the authority to approve a bigger structure because the impact to the surrounding is considered not as significant. You know, if you put it on the same size in a smaller property, yeah, you wouldn't want me approving that
right.
in there, or providing the notification process. But so it's always been tied on the size of the of the lot. The question comes in at some point, you know, how much is too much? And again, we came close to one that was in the south side of town, south of Covington Lane, and that's all the location I'll give you. And I believe that garage had close to like 1,500 square feet. But given the lot size, I mean,
It wasn't.
yeah.
Right.
It was in there, and how it was tucked in. There was, you know, that lot, you know, again, the way our code is to consider consider these on a case by case basis, and that is okay. You know, if you know, you rely on us to ensure that we justify and make rational, provide you rational information of why it may work here, but it doesn't work there.
Well, I remember too, when I was here that 2015 to 2019, and I remember we struggled with coming up what the numbers should be to allow staff. And I remember we set numbers and then we were going to reevaluate that depending on if there were problems with those or more stuff was coming to the commission, and then we were just constantly approving. You know, then we would increase those rates, you know, to then make it to be staff to, you know, make the process move a little faster.
And we did, since their initial adoption, we did 2 reiterations. One was on the pool size, and I think one was on the hardscape size.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good. That's right. That's right.
And that's why I say, you know, ordinances are organisms. They constantly, they gotta evolve, or else, you know, you're maintaining the status quo. It could get stagnant.
Now, I will say with the Board of Appeals, they don't like to move off of a set number.
Correct.
And you're bringing. I know, but if you're going to make it, that's why we gotta be careful that what those caps are makes sense. Rather than just arbitrarily set it and saying, well, Board of Appeal, you can always get a variance. The Board of Appeals are not.
It should never be that easy.
I used to remember Mr. Man, may he rest in peace, used to say, well, that's not really what the law says.
Right,
And
right.
you have to really show.
You have to show, and then you.
Something about property is why you need to. That's true. It's not even really hardship. It's just that you have something unusual about your physical property to prevent you from.
Let me finish, guys, if you don't mind. But they don't like to move from that. And now you're getting people making some of those decisions who have no experience at doing this. So trying to set whatever that cap is to the right amount, you know, is going to be very important, you know, to do, because you just can't rely on Board of Appeals is going to resolve.
Again, it goes down to, and this is probably, in this, to have this discussion, again, is it reasonable for property owners to have a detached garage? I think yes. I think that's one of our community, it meets our community values and the character that we want to maintain. Is it reasonable for somebody to have a two-car detached garage? I think it's okay, but that's getting bigger. And is it reasonable for somebody to have a three-car detached garage? I'm thinking if they have that much space to do it detached, they have enough space to add it onto the house. And it gets to that gray, but then is it reasonable to somebody to have a 5-bay car garage in the city of Olivet? And I don't necessarily know or think that it is.
There's probably 5 properties. There's a few properties that could do it. High acres, then there's.
But a structure that exists, I think.
Yeah, I see where you're going. I definitely see where you're going, but
Again, I don't.
I know new houses, a 2-car garage for a lot of households doesn't meet it. It's, and you're gonna be parking cars outside. Now, is that more desirable or not? I just from personal experience with 4 kids, we only have 2 cars, or 2-car garage. And then we have cars outside. Now, luckily, they're landscaped shaded, which helps. But that's the danger of you limit that, then you now have a whole parking lot out front. So I don't know. And I do know that there was a home across the street of ours where they do have a 4-car garage, and it can be done where it doesn't look, bad if you have the right size.
Yeah, but that one being attached to the house, correct?
It is.
And
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It is attached.
And again, I'm not opposed to how many garages you have in general, but if you're going to have a detached one,
Yeah,
independent of, unless you have a house that has no garage at all, I could see where having a 3-car accessory garage is reasonable. But at 5 and 6, is that really within the character of all of that? And I think given some of the lot sizes, it's stretching it.
Yeah. How big is that one garage on the north side of
That was 1,020, I believe, or it came up to that. I can't recall.
how many cars?
If you think about a 10 by 20, which is 200, so you could have up to 5 cars in that thing. Not necessarily that they're all comfortable and you can just widen and open the door.
Right.
And that one's unique because, and here's the other complexity of this. And now that is a wider property, but it has a lot of area due to its depth, not necessarily due to its width. And we have a lot of what I'll call finger lots throughout all of that. And while they may benefit in area, the width doesn't necessarily make that size the ideal.
Yeah, interesting.
The other thing it came about, between, it talks about accessory structure and accessory use. And that one, we use the term in this last petition about that it was an ADU in there, but it's still, in the world of zoning, it's still a residential use in there. It's not an accessory use, is that it's something that is not like a habitable, which usually refers to a garage and all that. But I think more people are using the term ADUs in the past 5 years as we talk about the housing crisis in there. And specifically, we permitted them in the past. We called them granny flats, mother-in-law units, different terms like that. Now the term is ADUs, and there's nothing to say in any of these cases that they could be a second family living within these units. I mean, they're still zone single family. And that process is in place. Our ordinance has not changed to allow two family uses on there. Now, can somebody do it? Yes. But it would be illegal and non-conforming in there.
What about vacation or AR?
That's different because again, you're utilizing the structure for residential purposes. You're gonna sleep, you're gonna live, sleep, eat.
But you're making, it's a business.
It starts getting into this gray area, no different than you leasing your car out, for use if you wanted to, in there. So this new economy has created some complexities in terms of how we share things and all that. It'll be interesting if they continue some of the discussion at the state last year was regarding, uh, these short-term rentals, and there was some court decision that was made that said they're residential. So as long as you have, a single, it is in a single family district, it's residential, it complies with, we couldn't use that business aspect as a,
Really?
yeah. So, well, and it depends like who's lobbying on who's on it. So they had quite a bit of push on there. Now, nothing came about in there, but I'm assuming that they're going to have more discussions regarding these. But typically accessory uses were home-based businesses. Other type of an accessory use, and I think we moved all our home-based businesses under that classification. Has and that's typically the most common. So even if like, I shampooed pets, and that's an accessory use that I could have and operated, or I did something. You get into that home business classification, being an accessory use to the principal use by residents on the property.
So it's not a business.
It is a business. But it's accessory to my primary residence. It's
Okay.
not if I converted the whole house and did just the business, then yes, then I pass the line. And it may be, we have a new city attorney, and that might be a really good good way to introduce her and have a discussion on some of these.
Did you have a thought? Okay. I didn't know if you wanted to wait.
And I would say when you have a new city council as well. I will say that we have had, just minor conversations about the arborist. Bring some more revenue into this community, and maybe that could be a part-time position, or like we've done in handling the stormwater runoff back in the day of, who came here and started with the mapping. That's a conversation for the future.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So 820 will be submitting some revisions. We don't know what those will be. Hopefully we'll see those sometime next week or so. They will be on the agenda for February 6th. And given that there is a time limitation, the commission will have to make a decision. Some of the background on that, again, this was kind of staff imposed. All they were coming in for was to do a trellis walkway with solar panels. And that gave me the opportunity to say, you got to go to the commission. Oh, and by the way, what are you going to do with the old garage pad that burnt down? So we asked them to, hey, think and let us know. Because all these questions were probably going to get asked.
Yeah.
And so they responded with what we have requested in there. Now, I don't know if that was to push the envelope or get some reaction to it, but ultimately, again, their petition to the commission was to do a trellis with solar panels in there. I kind of made that more complex, but that really is what the core thing that they were they were asking the commission, because they had everything in place and ready to start.
Yeah.
Supposedly in there. This has been an ongoing project in there. But there is nothing that requires the commission to take action or request an extension or to table the other items if it were chose to. I'm kind of curious to see what we get and see where that is.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. All right, if there's no further discussion, I think, or is there any public comments? Yeah, yeah. It's after 9.
Microphone.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear what was happening. Kate Pashon Hellman, 800 North Price. I think that this particular discussion is especially important because as I look at, it seems to me the majority of applicants that come before this commission stay pretty much within the codes, maybe a little bit over. But when you have applications that far exceed the codes in multiple ways, I think there's a difficulty that emerges that if they can exceed the codes in multiple ways and be approved by the PCDC, that the process effectively creates these loopholes for people to skirt the codes and can reward people who kind of go around the codes and effectively penalize the people who stick to the codes and allow who are then able to get administrative approval. So the concern is that the commission in some ways has the risk of acting like a board of adjustment when things are approved that go far beyond the code limitations. And I think that that puts the commission also in a very tenuous position. In addition, also puts the commission in a tenuous position because it then leaves the decision of the commissioners up to subjectivity. I have a problem with this part of the structure. Well, I don't really care about that part of the structure, but I care about this part of the structure, where the codes exist to create that framework that says these are the standards. And so I think it's really incumbent on the commission to think about this carefully so that the role of the commission in approving things that do not comply with the code restrictions that allow for administrative approval, for those things that go over those restrictions, where is the line between the commission's role and then getting more into that board of adjustment, board of appeals role?
Let me just interject. You did understand what the intent of those thresholds was to what we were going to feel comfortable letting staff make the decision versus what the board wanted to look at.
Right, but there isn't anything in place that says at what point does this trigger something beyond the commission? Because so you have, let's say the limitation for the garage, for a garage on a lot is 700 square feet. And a garage is presented to the commission that is 900 square feet.
I think what you have to understand too, though, that's a limitation to what staff can do on their own.
I do understand that the 700 feet is able to be approved administratively. I do
Right.
understand that. What I'm saying is that where is the line between going over the code? Like, why do we have codes if people can just come to the commission and exceed them?
But I don't think you understand the intent of how that code was written. The intent of that code was to have some jurisdictions or governance of what staff can do versus what would come to us. Because once it, reached a threshold that could potentially have more impacts with neighbors or things like that, that it came in front of the commission so that we had residents, here, volunteer residents who understand kind of the impacts that are there to kind of help, really to address those particular items.
Yes, I do understand that.
But you keep calling them regulations. And that's,
Well, they are the codes.
they're the codes, but that's not a regulation. That's that's
Okay.
a threshold of when it becomes, of who makes that decision. So that's, the whole thing is a regulation. I get that, but the numbers are not a regulation. Does that make sense at all? Maybe I'm not communicating it properly.
So I look at it this way is the 700 square foot garage. If you apply for a permit and it's under that 700 square foot, Carlos, Jack, they can look at it and say, yes, everything's fine. You've done everything. We can approve it. It doesn't have to go in front of the board because it's under that. We feel comfortable making that decision.
Right.
I apply for that same permit and it's 785 square feet. Okay, then let's go larger. It's 850 square feet. It's gonna have to come in front because we're gonna then look at how's it gonna impact my neighbor? How close am I to my am I too close to my property lines now and those things? I guess I look at it as I see where you're coming from. Like, are we? I don't see it as like people trying to get around the code. I look at it as of what they can do internally versus having us have to approve every petition that comes to the city.
That was the intent.
That's
Setting those.
that's the way
those
I see it.
thresholds.
That it's versus us having to look at every petition.
But, I mean, legally speaking, I think if you have a cap, say like, not to exceed 900 feet, and somebody wants to go above 900 feet, that's what triggers Board of Adjustment. They look at it legally. It's a separate process. Council has no role in that. And they have to prove that there's something about the property that makes them need to be in excess of 900 feet. There's something about the weird shape that it require, that has some impact. But that's it. I mean, like, if you don't meet the 900, you really should, we should not be approving something above 900 if that's what the code has provided for. The cap, as a cap.
Right. Is that, I guess that's my question then also is, we don't have caps though currently
Have a maximum cap of everything accumulated on that yard.
on that yard. Mhm.
Outside of the driveway.
Mhm. Yes.
10%.
So you
Correct.
do have some cap, and we don't have, I don't think, authority to go beyond that.
Yeah.
That's when you have to decide if you want to go to the Board of Adjustment, which should be a really, really, it's a legal process. It's literally almost a court process, and it's treated as such. And there's no appeal except to circuit court in St. Louis County.
And that's the way it is.
Right. If you
know.
want to go above, you have to have good reason
Right. And
that relates to the land itself.
and I'm a member of that. So
Yeah.
we go through,
Right.
we talk about all those things. We typically go item by item. How does this impact all of the different statements that are there? But the hard part that we had when we were coming up with these numbers in 2015 and 2019, it's a lot of these things vary depending on what it looks like, depending on where it's placed on the property, depending on the exact property dimensions. And that's where if you have a good architect, they can do a lot of, good things, to balance a lot of these needs. So to try to come up with strict caps is going to be extremely difficult. And it's trying to balance out what is going on. We've all been at houses, or you walk through when we're buying a house or whatever, that you saw houses or backyards or, accessory structures. They might have been this right square footage, but when you walk in, you're like, oh, this is not the house for me, So it's a challenge. The whole idea was to not tie up this commission with a whole bunch of reviews that commission and staff knew that was going to be easily approved. Is give them that authority. But to still have some authority over some of these accessory structures that were going on before 2015. And I remember some of the accessory structures that were being, constructed. The birdhouse, exactly. Which was almost like a home
Which is
built.
what actually brought that focus to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think, do you understand what we're saying?
Mhm. Yes, and it, as I understand it, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, the only limit that is set on at least accessory structures is the maximum lot coverage. That's the only one that says, that has the, and is not to exceed.
I thought there was a height one too, isn't there a height?
There's a height.
There's a height that the maximum in residential property would be 35 feet. The way this one reads is that it should, administratively, I can't issue a permit to something that's taller than 15 feet or the existing house, whichever is less in there. If someone wants to exceed that height and wants to go to the commission, that zoning district maximum height is 35 feet. So if somebody came in and they had 37-foot tall structure, accessory structure, then it shouldn't even come to the commission. You're correct.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm asking the commission to consider whether there are potential maximums that could be set that are possibly like not to exceed 20% of what is written in the code. That are there other limitations so that when you have petitions that come before you that exceed what is written in the code in multiple ways, there is a reasoning and a rationale for the commission to say yes or no.
I guess that maybe I'm not understanding correctly. We don't approve things that exceed the code.
Yes,
The-
you do.
This is where.
There's,
So-
You
so the-
approve things that exceed the authorization of staff.
And the authorization of staff is what is written in the code.
I understand that.
Right, so then you
But it's
are approving
different than,
things that exceed the code.
it's not that is not a cap. That's a cap for what staff can handle. Okay? And I personally think if you go with 20% over what staff was allowed, we designated those items based on obvious, that this was obvious that this is going to be, approved, based on our experiences that we had before. Now, if you go with 20% number, I personally think you're going to put a lot of restrictions on what people can do with their own property. And I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be dangerous. I'm curious to see what other communities have done, to see, what kind of caps have been established. Just because I do think that cap, I understand the need and the rationale for it, but it's going to be very difficult to determine,
So
in a
I
broad
just wanted
stance.
clarification because I understood that the square footage, which is the assess and is the cap for what can be done on property with regard to an accessory unit, the 10% or whatever the percentage was, 20%.
Accumulation of all
yeah.
accessory structures.
Okay, but
As a-
that cap applies to anything that comes before the commission.
The percentage cap,
Right,
yes.
it's not just, does Jack approve it? We can't go above that number. We
Right.
cannot.
I totally agree.
And you're
That's-
saying that too, is that we have gone above that number.
But I don't
No.
know about
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not
she's
saying
saying we've
Oh, I
gone
thought you said that.
above, she's saying that we're going on that particular property, that they're going above the threshold of what staff is allowed to approve.
And I think that's, as long as it's within the cap, yes, we can do that. We can go above the 700 and go to 899 if 900 is the cap. Would work out to be
Well, and-
mathematically the cap.
And I think it goes down to, and again, just in the intent of when it was being prepared, and we didn't have this discussion of would have there been a threshold of how much is too much per structure? We did it, the accumulation of structures not to exceed 10%, but we never said within each of these individual structures, the commission can only go up to this amount in there. We left the commission, it can be as big as it can be, as long as it doesn't exceed the accumulation of 10%. But the commission, through its site plan and community design review, can consider, it was to give a flexibility. Again, you kind of know a good architect can make something massive look, you know, in conformance in there, a good architect
Exactly.
in there. But, you know, a four-sided structure, you know, can look out of character.
Absolutely.
And that's no different than a house. In how you review those. I mean, and for the most part, there are guidelines and guidance to give on those. And even for an accessory structure, we have a section that gives some guidance, and we expect the materials and all that to apply. But should they be considered differently? And there is some merit in having that discussion in there. At that time, it was, no, the commission is not going to have a cap placed among it for each individual structure because it has a pretty strong process of community design and site plan review in there. The thing is like how, you know, how enforceable or how stringent the commission is going to be in pushing to get a better design or you know, or in there. And how do you do that, you know, so it is equitable? So somebody that had 850 square feet and you made them do all brick, yet somebody that did 10,020 square feet and siding was okay, you know, and
Design guidelines.
yes, exactly, you know, and not have that discussion of you know, what is the character, you know. Again,
I think we could probably craft something in the design guidelines as, you know, to address the obvious bad decisions, you know, or bad issues.
and it may be through that process.
Yeah.
What we did back in 2015 worked, because what was before you, and again, it's hard to disconnect in there. What was submitted would have been approved by, you know, ultimately, it ends with me, would have been approved by me and only me.
The trestle.
The whole thing, before we did the amendment, the way the
before you
old
did the
code
amendment.
worked
Yeah.
was that this would have been approved by only me. And I think that's too much responsibility to be making that type of decision, given everything else that, you know, in the context of the reviews. And what we did from a staff thing is like, let's put that to the commission, because, you know, I shouldn't be approving something like that in there, you know.
Without all the other reviews, and to have public comments, to have
Well, but
other
without,
commission
it
members.
really is without engaging in your guys' expertise.
Right.
I mean, I can think that this all looks good and all that, but, you know, it's one opinion versus 7, and we wanted to make sure that, you know, my role is to protect my staff and to make sure that there, you know, like something like that isn't going to come back and cause, you know, a destruction in our services or our employment, because we approved something that somebody thought was way too big, but it, you know, in the code wise, it was okay.
Right.
And those are difficult decisions to do, and therefore that's why we have these boards and commissions. It wasn't to make your process harder, but it requires 7 people, or, you know, 4 of the 7 to come to some consensus and say that. And I think that is reasonable. I look at the garage next door in there, and I'm glad I was not here when that got approved in there. Now it's part of the character of the community, you know, in there. But, you know, I feel sorry for whoever signed off on that and what was in
20 years ago.
yes. And that led to, there was a whole bunch of stormwater problems back there, and that we had a neighbor whose house caused a whole bunch of stormwater problems on an adjacent subdivision. In there, it's like, you know, those are the complexities that come up in there.
Yeah.
And I don't know who approved it and whether they were still here after they approved it in there. But, you know, it is in our best interest as staff is to seek, or, you know, the guidance, professional help of you guys. And that's why we brought it to you. Not because we were scared,
Yeah.
part of it. But I think, you know, something like that requires more input.
Let's get back to Kate.
Okay.
She's been patiently waiting.
No, I think, you know, I've expressed what I wanted to express and, yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
all. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing no one online, I'd say let's move on. We'll go to other business, item A. And I see multiple meeting minutes. Four.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to acknowledge receipt of meeting minutes for November 7th, 21st of November, December 5th, and December 19th.
Fantastic, acknowledged. And if anybody has any corrections or comments, please pass it on to Jack. All right, we'll move on to reports. Carlos?
Real quickly, our next meeting is February 6th. We'll probably have two items and there we'll kind of judge those and then have a more formal discussion on their council's meeting on January 28th. They'll have their first regular meeting or the second regular meeting of their month. I'll let the mayor discuss what items are going on in there. Don has the Economic Development Commission meeting on Monday, January 27th, in which she's got the city's finance director talking to the commission about our revenue sources and projections. And there should be a pretty good meeting. And there, outside of that, unless the commission wants individual updates on structures or
Not today.
activities, I'll hold
I
on.
would love to, but we're already pushing.
Okay.
Missy?
All right, I don't recall yet what the entire agenda is gonna be on January 28th, so I can't give you that summary. I can tell you that today was another one of those executive municipal league board meetings. And, part of the conversations was our representative Ian Mackey, who never showed up here, who never identified himself, nor did he do it in other communities, has, filed a bill for, that is very similar language, 28 pages, that is very similar to Better Together. So that is currently going through, and he is attempting to look for Republican supported sponsorship. Governor Keogh was sworn in, and one of the first things he did was dealing with the executive order, which is called the Blue Shield. He wants this to deal with making sure that we have higher standards for all law enforcement throughout the state. Right now, we got SB 5 and we are accredited, and this was discussed today when I said, we're CLIA accredited, what, we're better than, we're better than this, what are you looking for? And in all honesty, when we're looking at some of the criminal activity, juvenile activity, we're seeing it in many different regions. This governor really wants us statewide, and not every area is sufficient within their law enforcement and their standards for law enforcement. And I think somebody filed a bill that if your municipality is under 5,000 in population, you would no longer have your own police enforcement. So there's some strange bills getting pre-filed. But hopefully Keogh, in what he wants, that would be a better scenario, but I'm not sure whether his language includes that 5,000 citizenship threshold in order to have your own municipal police enforcement. The use tax, the city of Olivet has a use tax. We were really great many moons ago. I think around 2013. St. Louis County never did a use tax. It is my understanding, Representative Harder comes to our meetings, that St. Louis County wants to put a use tax on the ballot. It will be for this April, as long as everything that they have to do in their county council gets approved by the 28th of the month and then filed by 5:00 p.m. on the 28th of the month. With regard to the St. Louis County, if their use tax were to pass, it would basically bring in approximately $68 million for St. Louis County, and every municipality would get 1% of that. And technically, that 1% would generate $49 per person in your community. So we've got a little under 8,100 in our population.
8,504.
Yeah, please tell me that again, babe.
8,504.
Right on, man. 8,504, and that would be, we would get $49 per resident would be our take from the success of a St. Louis County use tax. So those are the things we talked about. The other thing that is going around is, again, do we get rid of sales tax on groceries? And, you know, some really, you know, good guys have been going up to Jefferson City and talking to our elected officials and basically saying, you know, if you eliminate this, you're really hurting, and you know, in many areas of rural and local, there is that serious talk of wanting to eliminate personal property tax. And we're saying, look, if you want to do that, you know, that is statewide. And you know, that's impactful for everybody. This other issue, you're attempting to only impact our region, and you know, do we want to support that? If you're going to go down that road, don't go down this road with regards to elimination of grocery tax. And there is a minority Democrat leader who expressed that they would be willing to consider the removal of sales tax on groceries. So, you know, I'm only just going to say this, and probably for the individual in the audience as well. It's really important to be connected to your municipal league to really know what's going on in Jefferson City. Because if you don't get to Jefferson City, or if you don't go to this public forum that Ian Mackey's going to be putting on, I think around the 28th of the month, and let him know your feelings, you know, it's legislators or, you know, they don't, they're not thinking about the local municipality and its impact. And we're attempting to identify to them, you're going to impact police, you're going to impact fire, you're going to impact services because you want to take these steps because it feels good to you. You know, address diapers, address hygiene products and things of that nature. Don't be going after what is the meat of revenue for municipalities to provide to their citizens. So those are the really big issues right now that we're looking at. I'm not going to go in the minutia of the bicker batter between the St. Louis County Council and the executive, but you know, just keep watching the news because there could be the effort of saying, let's get on the ballot a change within our charter to where the county goes to, as we have in our community, an actual administrative, you know, manager, not someone like, you know, the executive person like Sam Page. So those are the issues that are in the forefront that are going to be around this year. And I just want to make you aware of it.
Are you seeing more dramatic proposals than previous years?
Well, the answer is, you know, there was this one, no, but yes. You know, there was this one, Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus last year did a lot of damage, but I kind of say, well, they helped not get legislation passed because they were bickering so long in their session. And I'm told that, you know, that strength of that Freedom Caucus has gotten a little bit weaker. Some people have been turned out who played, you know, games of, you know, you're not going to get this because I want that. And, you know, so we're really going to kind of see, you know, how it goes. We know the type of legislators we have and what some focus has been. So, you know, you all need to, you know, send your information to our elected officials as well. And I don't know how the Democratic Party, you know, made their choice, but you know, it's not a good one for someone who should recognize the importance of what is important for local municipalities. So with that, I mean, that's really all I'm gonna report on. It's been a long night.
Yeah, thanks, Missy. If there's no other comments, Jack, it's 9:30. It's after 9:30.
All right. Just be on the lookout if any of you guys are interested. Parks is going to be putting on an event probably for the Chinese New Year coming up. It's still, they're going through the finalization of the process and organizing all that event. Just be on the lookout through the newsletter and everything about that date.
Good comment, Jim.
And if I could add one more thing, my guest for Coffee with the Mayor in February is going to be the newly St. Louis County elected representative for our district, Gretchen Banger.
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right.
Okay, last thing, please nominate your favorite business and restaurant for Restaurant and Business of the Year. It had.
Wow. Wow.
I know, it's coming
All
right
right.
up.
That being said,
Thank
we'll close this meeting at 9:31. Thanks, everybody.